Let's go to this conversation now. The ANC Chief Whip Mdumiseni Ntuli and the Minister in the Presidency Khumbudzo Ntshavheni have criticised the Democratic Alliance for boycotting the national dialogue. Speaking during the budget vote debate in Parliament, Ntuli slammed the DA's decision to pull out of the talks, saying that it was based on weak reasons, including the cost of the dialogue, and claims that the President is being unfair in disciplining members of his cabinet or the executive. Ntuli joins us now to discuss this and other key issues facing the government of national unity. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I think the pressing one is the appropriation bill coming up on Wednesday and the meeting that was held yesterday with the various whips from the different political parties. Have you now come to a conclusion around what's going to happen on Wednesday if the impasse between the ANC or members within the government of national unity, including the Democratic Alliance, does not come to a solution?
Well, good morning, Aldrin, and good morning to the viewers at home. You are quite correct. On the 23rd of this month, we're going to be voting for the appropriation bill in Parliament. And for that bill to pass, it requires that, at least in terms of the attendance, a minimum of 201 members of Parliament must be in the plenary on that day. And the majority of those who are in the plenary will determine whether the bill passes or does not pass. I must indicate that that bill is profoundly important to the development of our country because, as you know, that at the moment, the country is functioning at the 25% of its own budget because of the difficulties we're confronted with in April, as a consequence of which we are unable to pass the budget on time. So we can't allow a situation where when we meet on the 23rd, public representatives are unable to discharge their responsibility in the best interest of our country because that would have far-reaching consequences to the state of health in our country, the health department that is already very strained, education, social activities, and all other national imperatives, which you can't deal with unless the country has a budget. So there is an internal conversation that is taking place within the GNU and with other political parties in an effort to find common ground on areas of divergence, because I am very convinced as the Chief Whip of the ANC that the areas of disagreements cannot be more important than the national imperative to ensure that the country functions effectively and that we have a possibility urgently and without any delay to respond to the demands of our people.
Yeah. Does the postponement of the NEC meeting that was scheduled to take place this weekend make that process even more difficult or even tighter? Because one of the proposals we understand as part of the conversation was going to be the report that comes from the NWC about the debate around whether the Democratic Alliance continues within the government of national unity so that the ANC can then pave a way forward around what is going to happen with that government of national unity structure. Yesterday, of course, the President still expressed his confidence in the government of national unity and saying the partners have still come together to work together. But on the ground, we know with the threats that have been made by the Democratic Alliance that that is not essentially the case.
You see, Aldrin, yesterday, I as it usually the case, I reach out to the Chief Whip of the DA just to have a conversation one-on-one to look at how do we respond to the crisis at hand, and also to ascertain his commitment as the leader of the DA in Parliament on us finding a solution to the current impasse. The Chief Whip of the DA gave me an assurance that he understands the consequences of not having a budget being passed on the 23rd. And he is also discussing this matter with his own colleagues, because I was saying to him, it can't be that their unhappiness, for instance, about the withdrawal of the Deputy Minister who happens to be a member of the DA, their unhappiness about certain ministries which are occupied by ministers who happen to be members of the ANC, must take precedence over what the both of us have always been discussing, just the two of us, but including the GNU, as national tasks that Parliament must discharge and live up to. So I'm quite optimistic that between now and Tuesday, the GNU parties first and foremost, but I also think there are other parties who are not in the GNU who would make sure that, as it was done when we're dealing with the fiscal framework in April, that whatever our own political differences, we don't forget that we're in that national parliament because we represent the interest of the people of this country, especially the poor, the marginalized, who have no other means of survival except depending on the state interventions to change their living conditions. So the postponement of the NEC, I don't think that it will have any impact on whether or not we succeed on our effort. I think the Secretary General and the national leadership saw it fit that the ANC should be deferred to the future, to another date in future, in order to give way, among other things, in order to give way for this extensive discussion and dialogue that must take place within and among parties in the national government of unity. Because we have to find a solution to this impasse. And I'm saying we have to, not because it's in our own interest, but because the country is immersed in a deep crisis, Aldrin, as you know. The levels of unemployment, poverty, inequality. You can't have parliament that is engaged in some form of pacification when the country is in deep crisis as we're facing today. So I think that the majority will have to prevail. I hope that DA will reconsider many of its problematic positions, including the withdrawal, not just the withdrawal on the national dialogue, but their pronounced position that they are going to campaign against it, because I think all of those positions were taken in the context of anger, unhappiness, and I think we've got to find a way to overcome moments such as those and look forward in one direction in terms of how we respond to the national imperatives.
Yeah. So the DA has obviously always argued that the ANC should understand that it is not governing alone. It is part of a coalition, essentially. But doesn't the DA have a point, though, to say that there are colleagues that are part of cabinet that we don't necessarily feel should be our colleagues in the cabinet, and they've listed some of the reasons. Minister Nkabane is one of them. You have spoken out on the conduct of the minister, for instance, when you are being interviewed on the SABC. So just on that basis, shouldn't or doesn't the DA have a point here to say that, listen, you have Minister Nkabane, who's part of cabinet. She essentially lied to Parliament. Yes, the investigation is still underway, the Ethics Committee, but you have told the SABC that Nobuhle Nkabane acted in a problematic manner in Parliament and misrepresented the facts. So just on that basis, you can't have her continue in that position. Don't you think so?
Aldrin, I want to reaffirm the statement I made in one of the television networks of our country, the SABC, as you are saying, that there's no way you can see that the manner in which that particular minister Comrade Nkabane, there's no way you can see that her actions in that portfolio committee and the subsequent developments were very much inconsistent with what she presented before the portfolio committee. So the concern of the DA about that kind of conduct is correct, and it's a concern we also share. But what we've been insisting to the DA is that we've all entered into a commitment through the statement of intent, in which we said the President of the Republic of South Africa would be expected to exercise his authority over cabinet in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. It's the President that hires and fires ministers. It's the President that hires and fires deputy ministers, so as other bodies that as determined by the Constitution. We are not opposed to the DA expressing its unhappiness about the suitability of some of the members of Parliament, or whether or not they're in Parliament or in the executive. Sure, that is expected to happen. There's nothing wrong with that. Where we have a concern with, you can't then say, President, I'm putting a gun on your head. If you don't act in this particular manner, within the time frame as determined by myself, I am not going to participate in the national dialogue. I'm not going to participate in passing the budget. Never mind the consequences, the devastating consequences that such a withdrawal of the DA or anybody in the country, especially on the matter of the national budget, will have on our people. We don't think that we should condemn the people of this country to such a difficult situation. We're already, as I said, confronted by a palpable sense of despondence, hopelessness, and very unhappiness because of the conditions in which they find themselves. If you don't pass a budget, Aldrin, the fact of the matter is that you would have no money to run government. You're going to have to wait for another period for Parliament to reconsider the appropriation bill. Already we're not running government in the full steam as we should. What are the implications of that? It means when you're only spending 25% of your budget, it's inevitable that by the end of this financial year, a number of the ministries, including those that would have done well on the budget, will not be able to fulfill the mandate that is expected by the people of South Africa. Now, if that does not happen because of incompetence, incapacity, there should be a solution to remedy that. But it must not happen because parliamentarians, those who are supposed to be the best representatives of our people, have actually acted in a way that is in contempt of the same people that they are supposed to represent. That the president must act on wrong things that are happening in cabinet shop. We all agree on that. But we don't think that we can put that as a condition for us, therefore, to discharge this other important national responsibility to the people of South Africa.
Yeah. Just finally, as the chief whip of the ANC, is the caucus and the party shaken at all by a threat by the MK party that if the president doesn't resign by 9 o'clock this morning, on the basis of the pronouncements that he made on the putting of leave of Minister Senzo Mchunu and appointment of Professor Kachalia, that they will push for a motion of no confidence and will also be rolling out mass action. Is the ANC shaken at all?
No, not at all. You see, the MK party has taken a very strange position of opposing literally everything that has got to do with the government. Everything that is before Parliament, including a budget that must be approved in order for them as MPs to be paid salaries. The MK will not agree with that because they've been told by their strong man, their leader, that you must never agree to anything that has got to do with that African National Congress. And so that's how they operate, which is not very rational. I don't think that we can be shaken by the threat of a vote of no confidence against President Ramaphosa. Aldrin, let me just make this point. If there are grave allegations against a minister, as it is the case with Comrade Senzo Mchunu, these allegations are very grave, which were leveled by the KZN Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Mpanas. Very, very serious allegations. We've got to get into the bottom of those allegations. But if you stand up, if the president were to stand up and say, I fire this minister because there are allegations, what happens when tomorrow there are other allegations against another minister? The president must stand up and fire that minister. Allegations against the chief whip must be fired. We don't run a country like that. That is the politics of strongmen. How you run a country is that when there's an allegation, you must set up a legitimate platform through which the nation can be afforded an opportunity on its own to listen to the presentations by those who are leveling accusation against a particular official of government. And for that official of government equally to respond to those accusations. We can only blame the president for inaction or failing to act once that process has run its course and maybe there's evidence, concrete evidence that something fundamentally wrong, which is involving a minister in this case. But without running that process, I can tell you, we will have no government. Everybody is going to stand up and say, I know this one has done the following things. No investigation, go. The next person, no investigation, go. By the time the country wakes up, we would realize that we're no longer in a democratic country where you have to run processes in order to prove veracity or otherwise of any allegations. We're only subjected to the politics of strongmen. And we can't allow that. But unfortunately, that's what I was saying in the debate in Parliament. The politics of the leader of the MK party and the leader of the EFF in this case is the politics of strongmen. Those are people who want us to choose between the future in which we can discuss and negotiate our present and determine the future we want, and taking decisions impulsively and finding a way to live with consequences of doing that. We don't think as the ANC that is a rational way to run government. We think that processes must run their course. All we can hope for, and we've raised this with the president, is that this commission must not take too long. It must take the time as prescribed by the president so that the nation will be at ease to get the facts about what has happened.